The other thing that the unemployment benefits, people who are laid off, and I actually did lay off a bunch of my employees because that seemed like the smart thing to do. Whatever that people are getting from the state, they're going to get an extra $600 a week from the federal government. And that is
Hmm.
also designed to direct cash directly to people who are unemployed and need the help. And yeah, there's hundreds of billions of dollars in there, the usual stuff for big business that'll get sucked up and used in weird ways and make headlines about bosses who pay themselves bonuses. But this bill seems to have quite a bit that's going to actually arrive down at the people who need it the most. And I find that quite encouraging.
Me too. It seems like, thank you for sharing that because I had not heard that about the loans converting it over into grants for payroll. And people like me that do with payroll, I definitely appreciate that. And I want to go back to, I know we're talking about the cash, and this is important for us as small business owners, but more important are we're holding on to employees. And one thing I want to read from your book was one of the things that was hardest for me, and that was firing my first employee. I had someone I had to fire, and I tell you, I think I was sick for days afterwards. Paul has in his book, it was 8 years before I had to do it again. This is the second fire. But the second time was even worse. This was a full time employee, Nate Morgan, who'd been with me for 4 years. His work wasn't great and his attendance was spotty, but I liked him and kept finding excuses for his failures. Finally, he didn't show up one day, even though I'd emphasized that he was needed for a critical delivery. No phone call, no nothing. When he rolled in the following day, I was furious and told him it was over. He was astonished. Apparently, all the little talks I'd given him about what was expected had made no impression, or he thought that I would never go through with it. He begged me for another chance, tears rolling down his cheeks. But my other workers were sick of his failures, and one guy told me that if I didn't fire Nate, he would quit. So I steeled myself and fired him. I knew that he would have a hard time getting another job, but I did it anyway. After he left, I broke down myself. Depriving someone of employment is no joke, but the mood of the other employees improved immediately. And that taught me a valuable lesson. Bad employees make good employees feel bad. Paul, many people have bad employees. And right now, they're seeing it. People that may be able to work from home aren't adding any value to the business. So, from an employee perspective, what can they do right now to add more value to the company?
This is a tough one. And there's an answer that would have made sense 3 weeks ago. And there's an answer that makes sense right now. And this has to do with, again, something I heard about this bill, which is that the incentive for turning the loan into a grant is to not fire
Hmm.
anybody. And as I understand it, and this is speculation, we don't know the actual mechanism, that if you have people who have been laid off now, that's okay. You can bring them back on when you apply for the loan. But then you're at a certain point, you're going to have to say, I have this many people and I commit to keeping this many people employed. And then in order for the loan to turn into free money, you're going to have to keep them employed. Obviously, that's a nightmare for a boss who's trying to deal with an employee who is misbehaving in any number of ways, just not performing or worse. Now, I'm going to give you two answers. The first answer is what I would have done in the past. And since I wrote the book, and especially since I fired that guy, which is almost 20 some years ago at this point, I really refined my process for warning people and firing. And the critical thing being that you can have conversations with people all day and they stare at you and sometimes they hear what you're saying, sometimes they don't. But if you write down what the problem is and sort of sit down and for 40 minutes you write, here's the person, here's what they're being paid now, here's their benefits. That's the top of the sheet. Second thing, here's why we're having this conversation. These things happened. Joe Blow didn't show up 3 days in a row. Joe Blow broke a machine that he should have known better. Joe Blow came in high, whatever. Write it down. This is what the problem is. Second of all, what is the policy that you have as a company that this violates? And I hope to God that every business owner starts to get some kind of employment manual together. But if nothing else, just like use the 10 commandments, okay? Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not lie, or whatever. And write down why the action that you object to was wrong. What's the problem with it? And then number 3 is, here's what we want you to do to fix this. Never come in late again. Don't operate any machines you don't have training. Whatever it is, make it clear that there is a path to improvement. And then the 4th thing is 2 things. First of all, if you improve, what happens? You're forgiven, you're back in status, whatever. And then if you don't improve, what happens? You do this again, you are fired. Then when you have all that written down, put 2 lines at the bottom. One is yours, I issued this, and then the next one is for the employee. I read this and I understood this. Now, you bring that employee into a meeting, you have a witness, their supervisor or whatever. Don't be alone with an employee in a room. You set this paper down in front of them and say, you are being disciplined as described in this paper. You read it to them, every word. And then at the end, you say, do you have any questions or comments? And they can say, oh, I didn't do it, blah, 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 blah. Just listen to them. And then if you hear something that's really surprising, you can at that point change your mind. But most of the time, you're just going to have to steel yourself and say, that's very interesting. We're going to stick with the plan on this piece of paper. And then you make them sign it. If they refuse to sign it, then they quit. And then you enforce it, because people will either improve or they won't. And then the next time, if they don't improve, you've warned them, you have this thing, and you write the whole thing again. Here's what they did. Here's how this violates the previous warning. Here's what I said I was going to do. I'm going to fire them. You are fired. And then you have a witness, you sit them down. It's a procedure. And what it does, and I've done this maybe, I don't know, half a dozen times since I wrote the book, it takes the agony out of the process. It takes the agony out of the process. It doesn't take the agony out of the decision. It's awful to fire people. It's awful to consider the human condition and look at somebody you know and say, like, why in the world are you such a moron that you put yourself in this position? But they do. But now you have a procedure. So you know what steps to take, and you don't have to dither and wonder. You just do it. And the interesting thing to me is that I've had a lot of good employees who sort of started to drift off the path, and talk to them, they drift, talk to them, they drift. When you sit them down with that paper and say, listen to me, this is serious. Here's the fork in the road. And one path leads to, I'm going to forget about this and forgive, and we're going to go on. And the other one, you're out of here. Good employees tend to shape up. And bad employees, now you've put them on a path, and you can get them out. And the reaction of the other employees will be just as I described in the book. When there's somebody who's not performing, everybody else is really pissed off about it, because they recognize, maybe consciously or unconsciously, that a misperforming employee is weakening the whole team. It makes it harder to get that bonus. It makes it harder to meet those deadlines. It makes it harder for the company to be successful. And the good employees need the company to be successful. Your job as a boss to enforce those standards and to do the hard things. So that procedure has been really great for me, because it just tells me what to do. You know, like, I didn't think of the procedure while I was mad. I thought of it while I wasn't mad. But when I'm mad, then I know what to do. And it calms me down, and it makes it rational. And everybody in the company knows what happened. And even the person who gets fired usually recognizes, okay, I had a chance. You know, I was warned. It was serious. It was clear. I was given all this. And since I've let people go using that procedure, it's actually been way less drama than you would think.